All right, everyone, get ready because today we are diving into a book that's basically a business classic now, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I am so ready to unpack this one because honestly, Sinek's ideas about why people do things, not just what they do, it's really changed how we think about leadership and communication as a whole.
Oh, yeah, it's a total game changer.
Yeah.
It's not just, fluffy advice or anything. Sinek's really tapping into, like, the core of what makes us tick.
And he does it in such a captivating way, too. So let's get to the heart of it, this whole idea of the why. How does Sinek lay that out for us?
Well, he introduces this idea called the golden circle. And it sounds kind of simple at first, but it is seriously profound. So picture this three concentric circles, all right? Right in the center, you've got your why, your purpose, your cause, your belief. The next ring out is how the processes or actions you take to actually live out that why. And then the outermost ring, that's what the products you sell, the services you offer.
Okay, so it's about going deeper than just what you do and really understanding the why behind it. But how does that actually play out in the real world? Like, how does that translate to success?
It all comes down to the direction of communication. Most companies, they communicate from the outside in. So they lead with what they do. Maybe they'll touch on how they do it, but they rarely ever get to the why. But inspiring leaders and organizations, they flip that script. They communicate from the inside out, starting with their why.
So they're not just selling a product, they're selling a belief, a reason to really believe in them. It's like Apple, you always seem to know what they stand for, even without them saying it.
Exactly. Apple has seriously mastered communicating their why. They challenge the status quo. They want to empower people through technology. That's their why. And it resonates through everything they do, their products, their marketing, you name it.
Now, that is so fascinating. So what happens when companies try to lead with what they do without a strong why?
Well, Sinek uses a really good example. Dell, back in the early 2000s, they were known for their computers, right? But then they tried to branch out into MP3 players and PDAs.
Oh, yeah, I remember those Dell DJ things. Those never really took off the way iPods did, though.
Exactly. And part of that was because Dell just couldn't articulate why they were making these products. The consumers couldn't really reconcile a Dell MP3 player with what they knew about the brand. It was all what and no why.
It's like they missed that, like, emotional connection that makes a brand really stick with you.
Exactly. And Sinek, he digs into the science of this, and it's really cool. He talks about the limbic brain, which is the part of our brain responsible for emotions and decision-making. And he argues that we make most of our decisions based on feeling, not just logic.
Wait, so even when we think we're being all rational, it's actually our gut feeling driving the bus?
A lot of the time, yeah. That's why we have gut decisions that just feel right, even if we can't fully explain them. And companies that tap into that emotional core, that speak to our why, those are the ones that we form lasting connections with.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm curious, how does this whole limbic brain thing actually play out in like the business world?
Well, think about how laundry detergent used to be marketed. Companies were all about brighter whites, stain removal. And while those things are important, they missed a key why.
Which is?
People want clean clothes, sure, but why? It's not just about being clean, it's about the feeling. Clean clothes make you feel confident, put together, ready to face the day. Sendy even talks about how anthropologists found that people associate clean clothes with a sense of order and control in their lives.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. But it makes so much sense. It's not just detergent, it's a feeling.
Exactly.
Mhm.
When companies tap into that deeper why, that emotional need, their message becomes so much more powerful.
This is brilliant. So how do we actually figure out our own why? And once we know it, how do we make sure we're staying true to it, especially with all the distractions we face every day?
That's where Sinek introduces this concept called the celery test. It might sound a little funny, but it's shockingly effective.
The celery test. You've got my attention.
Okay, so imagine you're at the grocery store,
Yeah.
and your why for being there is to eat healthy. You're committed to making good choices, but then you walk past the bakery and you see this decadent chocolate cake just calling your name.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. And at the same time, you see a simple celery stick. Both are choices you could make, but which one actually aligns with your why?
The celery, obviously. Even though that cake is tempting.
Exactly. That's the celery test in action. It's about checking your decisions, big or small, against your why. If it doesn't align, it might be a chocolate cake temptation trying to lead you astray.
I love that. So it's not really about celery. It's about using your why as a filter for your choices to make sure you're being true to yourself.
Exactly. And this applies to way more than just groceries, right? It could be a job offer, a marketing campaign, even a relationship. If it doesn't pass a celery test, think twice.
That's seriously actionable advice. I can already see how valuable this is in making decisions that actually align with what matters to me.
It's about recognizing those chocolate cake temptations that might sound good in the moment, but ultimately don't serve your greater purpose.
This whole idea of staying true to your why it makes me think about those companies and leaders I really admire. It's like they're not just selling me something, they're inviting me to be a part of something bigger, something I actually believe in.
Absolutely. And so much of that comes down to trust. Sinek calls it the ultimate currency in any relationship, whether it's business or personal. When you trust a company, you're more likely to buy from them, to recommend them. You're even more likely to forgive them if they make a mistake.
Okay, so how does this why thing actually translate to building trust with customers? I'm thinking about all those companies with those vague mission statements that sound good on paper, but they don't really mean anything.
It's all about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And Sinek, he uses Southwest Airlines as like the perfect example of a company that's built trust by consistently living out their why. Their why is all about taking care of their employees first and foremost.
Yeah, Southwest is famous for their company culture. They seem to genuinely care about their people.
Right. And it's not just some HR thing. It's like baked into their entire operation. They get that happy, valued employees. They lead to happy customers, which means a successful business. And it shows. They've got incredibly loyal employees who are known for going above and beyond.
That's a powerful testament to the idea that putting your people first, it's not just the right thing to do, it's actually a smart business strategy.
Exactly. And Sinek contrasts this with Continental Airlines back in the early 90s.
Hmm.
Before their CEO, Gordon Bethune, came in, they were really struggling. And it wasn't because they lacked resources or anything. It was because they had this massive trust problem.
Okay, so more than just like planes and routes, trust was the missing ingredient for Continental. But what did that lack of trust actually look like within the company?
Oh, it was everywhere. Employees felt undervalued and mistreated by management, and that just trickled down to how they interacted with customers. It led to poor service, a negative brand perception, just a classic example of how a toxic culture can poison an entire organization.
It's amazing how quickly a company's internal culture can impact its public image. So, how did Bethune come in and actually turn things around?
He knew that rebuilding trust had to be his top priority. He focused on simple but really powerful changes, making himself accessible to employees, having an open-door policy. He even tied employee bonuses to things they could actually control, like on-time performance.
So, it wasn't about these big, showy gestures. It was about taking concrete actions that showed a real commitment to his employees.
Exactly. He shifted the whole focus from profits at all costs to valuing the people who made those profits possible. And the results speak for themselves. Continental went from almost collapsing to being incredibly successful under Bethune's leadership.
That is a great example of how a leader's commitment to their why can have such a ripple effect.
It's about aligning actions with values. It builds that authenticity that customers can really sense and connect with.
It makes me think about another example Sinek uses, Ernest Shackleton in his expedition to Antarctica.
Oh, that's a good one. So here's Shackleton putting together this team for this crazy, dangerous expedition. And in his ad, he is brutally honest about the risks, low-pay extreme conditions, a very real chance of death.
Not exactly the most appealing job posting.
Right. But here's the thing. Shackleton also emphasized the adventure, the challenge, the chance to do something truly extraordinary. He was appealing to a very specific why.
He wasn't looking for just anyone. He needed people who were motivated by the mission itself, not just the paycheck.
Exactly. He was filtering out the chocolate cake seekers and attracting the celery stick believers.
Exact.
And because of that, he assembled this incredibly resilient team that was deeply loyal. And ultimately, they helped him navigate this super dangerous situation. It really shows the power of communicating your why clearly to attract those right people.
Okay, so let's say we've got a strong why. We've built trust with our team and our customers. How do we actually get our message out there and start building that movement? How do we find our people?
That's where things get really interesting. Sinek connects this back to something called the law of diffusion of innovations. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's basically about how ideas spread.
Oh, yeah. I remember learning about this. It's that bell curve thing, right? Where you have different groups of people who adopt new ideas at different speeds.
Exactly. You've got your innovators, your early adopters, your early majority, late majority, and then the laggards.
Mm.
And Sinek's point is that most companies, they focus all their energy on trying to win over the masses, that middle of the bell curve.
Which is really expensive and usually doesn't work that well, like trying to convince someone who hates coffee to start drinking lattes every day.
Exactly. Total uphill battle. The real magic happens when you focus on those early adopters. The folks who are already drawn to new ideas, who get excited about innovation.
It's about finding your tribe, the people who already get your why even before you've explained it.
You got it. They become like your evangelists,
Hmm.
spreading the word and influencing those bigger groups that are much harder to reach directly.
It's like you're starting a spark that grows naturally instead of trying to force a wildfire.
That's a great way to put it. And Sinek actually uses TiVo as kind of a cautionary tale here. Do you remember TiVo?
Vaguely, they were one of the first DVR companies, right?
Yeah, and they had an amazing product, solid funding. But they never really communicated their why effectively. They focused on all the features and benefits, the what and the how, but they didn't connect with those early adopters who were looking for a way to break free from TD schedules.
It's like they had the celery sticks but forgot to explain why they were so great.
Exactly. They totally missed that chance to build a movement around a shared belief.
So even with a great product, even a great idea, without a strong why and a focus on those early adopters, it's way harder to get any traction.
It's the difference between just having a good product and building a brand that people love.
Which makes me think about something else Sinek talks about. How logos can become these powerful symbols when they actually represent a why that people believe in.
Absolutely. Think about Harley Davidson. People tattoo that logo on themselves. It's not just a motorcycle. It's this symbol of freedom rebellion, a certain lifestyle.
Yeah, it's like a badge of belonging, a way to signal you're part of the tribe.
Exactly. And Sinek contrasts that with companies that just plaster their logo on everything without any real meaning behind it. It just feels empty, inauthentic.
All surface, no substance. And speaking of powerful brands, Sinek talks about Apple's Think Different
Oh,
campaign.
that was brilliant. It wasn't about the computers themselves or anything. It was about celebrating the rebels, the misfits, the people who saw the world differently and challenged the status quo.
And that message, it really connected with people. It wasn't about buying a computer, it was about buying into a whole belief system.
Exactly. That's the power of connecting with people on that level of why. You're inviting them to join a mission, to be part of something bigger than themselves.
Okay, so we've built trust, we found our tribe, our message is resonating. But how do we make sure our why doesn't fade as our company grows? Because let's be real, it's so easy for things to get diluted, for that initial spark to fade. How do we avoid becoming another cautionary tale like Walmart, which Sinek uses as an example of a company that kind of lost its way?
That's a really important question.
Oh, wow.
And it's where a lot of companies stumble. Cindy calls it the split. That point where the why starts to get blurry and the company starts drifting from its core purpose.
And that's when things can go sideways, right?
Definitely. When a company loses sight of its why, it's vulnerable to all sorts of problems. It might chase after every new trend, making decisions based on short-term profits. Or like Walmart, they might lose that authentic connection with their employees and customers.
So how do we stop this split from happening? How do we make sure that our why stays central, even as things change and the company grows?
Mhm.
It's like that saying, right, what got you here won't get you there. You can have a great why to start, but then as things change, the company grows, maybe the market shifts. How do you keep that initial spark alive?
It takes work. It's the constant process of reinforcement, and it really starts with leadership. Cynic says great leaders aren't just the ones with the vision. They're guardians of the why. They embody it. They talk about it all the time. They make decisions based on it.
So it's not enough to have your mission statement framed on the wall. You need leaders who are actually living and breathing the company's why every single day.
Exactly. They become these walking reminders of what the company really stands for. Think about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, both incredibly passionate leaders who were totally connected to their company's why. And when they stepped back, their companies felt it.
It's interesting. It's almost like the company's why was so tied to those specific leaders that it was tough to keep that same energy going without them there.
Exactly. It shows how important it is for that why to be like ingrained in the company's DNA,
Yeah.
not just attached to one person.
And Southwest Airlines is a good example of the opposite, right? They've had, I don't know how many CEOs now, and they haven't lost their way.
Absolutely. When Herb Kelleher, their legendary CEO, stepped down, he was followed by someone who truly got their culture. Sinek even points out that Kelleher's replacement was known for being really down-to-earth and approachable, a true believer in their employee-first philosophy. It was a really smooth transition because their why was bigger than just one person.
That's really cool to see. A company that's managed to hold on to its identity even with different leaders and market changes and everything else. It proves you really can stay true to your why even as you evolve.
And it's not always about those big pronouncements either. It's about the little things, the everyday decisions. Sinek talks about this woman, Christina Harbridge. She founded a company in an industry that's not exactly known for having a super inspiring why debt collection.
That collection.
Yeah.
That's not really the first thing you think of when you think purpose-driven business.
Right. But Harbridge, she had this powerful why. She believed that everyone deserves respect and dignity no matter what, even if they're having money troubles. So she trained her employees to really listen to people's stories. Yeah.
Mhm.
Understand their situation and try to find solutions that worked for everyone.
So it was about building relationships with people, not just, forcing them to pay up.
Exactly. And it worked. They had crazy high collection rates. But more importantly, they changed how people saw the whole debt collection thing. It proves that even in a tough industry, a strong why can make a huge difference.
That's a perfect example of how why isn't about the what, it's about the how, approaching your entire business with purpose, with humanity.
Remembering that at the end of the day, it's about people, not just numbers.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive, I have to say. So what does this all mean for our listeners? How can we take these ideas and apply them to our own lives, even if we're not CEOs or running big companies?
That's what's so great about Cynic's work. It applies to everyone. It's all about figuring out what truly matters to you, what drives you, and then making choices that line up with that purpose.
Finding our own personal why.
Exactly. It could be something big like changing the world, or something smaller like wanting to be a good parent.
But once you know your why, it can guide you in every part of your life, your career, your relationships, how you spend your time. It's about living a life that's meaningful to you, that feels authentic.
And you never know. You might even inspire other people along the way. Think about all the amazing things that started because one person had a clear why and the guts to go for it.
So if our listeners could take away one thing from Start With Why, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? Why does it matter? And when you find that answer, let it guide you in everything you do.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for diving into Start With Why with us. I think we all learned a lot about the power of purpose, and not just in the business world and life too.
It's been my pleasure.
And for everyone listening, if you want to learn more, definitely check out Simon Sinek's book. It's full of great insights and inspiring stories. Until next time, keep asking why and keep making your mark on the world.